This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you very much for tuning in to the program. It's Thursday, January the 15th. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly. David Williams, he's produced the program. Let's get it going. If you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial to get in the queue and on the air is 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. So I see that let me start again. I was watching SportsCenter this morning, and one of their so-called highlight of the night packages that they call the best featured one of the Newfoundland Regiment players, Marek Danicek, scoring an absolute beauty, wicked dangle against the St. John Sea Dogs just last weekend. He was in the package. And for junior hockey fans, the Regiment are back in town tonight. A 3-game set begins against the Rimouski Oceanic. And speaking of junior, so I just saw this random sports history note. 1986. Montreal's rookie goaltender Patrick Roy recorded his first of 66 career NHL shutouts. Met and interviewed Roy when he was here as the head coach of the Quebec Rampart in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. All right. So yesterday I gave some shout-outs to some of the members of Team Canada's U16 ball hockey team set to participate in the World Championships this summer in Sheffield, England. Left one player off the list. Don't like doing that. So also add to it, Georgia Smith, is also a member of that team. 21 players on Team Canada. 7 are from this province, so that's pretty cool. All right, let's keep going. So maybe because I live in this urban bubble, hadn't really factored in some of the issues regarding dogs as it pertains to trappers and the traps that they've set. Since we mentioned the tragic incident in Nova Scotia where a young boy just riding his bike got attacked by 3 large breed dogs and was killed. Lots of people chiming in since that occasion, talking about communities in this province where big dogs are roaming freely, which is absolutely outside the rules. The rules are very clear on that front. Dogs have to be on a leash if they're not on your own property. Now I see this story. Okay, and this is about family taking their dog for a walk on a trail just outside of Hickman's Harbour, and their 4-year-old pug caught and killed in a beaver trap set next to the trail. Up in Happy Valley Goose Bay, another fella out for a walk with his husky Brody got caught in another trap. Fortunately, was able to release the trap from the dog's leg, and the dog is injured but okay, is alive. So they're talking about now the need for signs to be put up if there's traps in the area. Look, no one's suggesting that trappers are putting out their traps intending to hurt someone's pet, but it's an interesting kind of conflation here. There's really no good reason why the province can't require signage, like for instance to say traps are set 200 meters ahead. So if and when you have your dog off the leash, which you're not supposed to in the first place, is you'll be much more careful and cautious and put the dog back on a leash. So I had never even considered the possibility of coming up against a trap set for a beaver or anything else when out for a walk with the dog. But apparently that's the instance in some parts of the province. So the 2025-26 Hunting and Trapping Guide states trappers must have a license, and beaver trappers in particular are assigned a fixed trap line. So I would imagine between the trappers, which is part of our culture, between the trappers and the provincial government and pet owners, maybe there's a better way to ensure that something like this 4-year-old pug Winston doesn't get killed in a beaver trap. But that story has kind of shook me a little bit this morning. And on that front, we can talk about how people do indeed take their dogs off leash in very public areas that are used by many people, whether it be pedestrians or joggers or cyclists or scooters or whatever the case may be. And I'll add to it. Since we talk about pets, I always get plenty of correspondence regarding veterinarian care, whether it be costs or access to emergency vet care or anything in that envelope. We're absolutely happy to take it on if you're so inclined. All right. This one from the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary Association, the RNCA, talking about the number of calls to the RNC last year, for the first time ever, exceeded 90,000, a record high number of calls. It's sort of an interesting position taken by the RNC on this front, that they say, the increase can be attributed to a number of things. Talk about more crime as a factor, but also the force has become more accessible to the public, so says Constable Steph Myers. So online reporting system, more information on social media, and other issues regarding working and responding to calls. But if it's an access issue, fair enough. but it just does kind of mimic some of the stacked Canada numbers we've seen regarding the prevalence of crime and the type of crime, from property crimes all the way to the most heinous crimes that we see populating the court docket all the time. So record number of calls to the RNC. Now, some people will tell me that I don't even bother, because the last time I tried, I didn't get any response. So you know full well that the ranks of the RNC and the RCMP, if this is the call volume, I suppose they triage, just like if you present yourself at the emergency room, but that is a bit of an unsettling number to see. Your thoughts? Yesterday had a couple of, I don't know if they were insightful or inspirational, but I think, and hopefully very helpful calls to people who are on the pathway to recovery from one addiction or another. Garrett in particular called, and I thought he really painted a very clear picture about how, if we don't try to replicate some of the issues being put forward by various organizations regarding easy access to detox, reducing the amount of time between detox and rehab, going from rehab into sober living. And the numbers are pretty clear. If you're living in a sober living home, then your opportunity to relapse is dramatically reduced. So I really appreciated them making time for the program, because it's not easy to come forward and talk about your own issues like addiction and the pathway to recovery. So I think we've got to put that out there insofar as criminal justice, the healthcare system, and people's individual well-being, their relationship with their families, the ability to get back in the workforce. So for folks who heard those calls, hopefully it spark some sort of light in you that if you do think you do need help, please go get it. And if that's the case, we've got to ensure that the government and all the various agencies associated with addictions really need to do better to make sure it's easily accessible, and the time required to actually get through rehabilitation is there. And then yes, the creation of more provincial government-backed sober living homes just makes sense. If you go to any research done about sober living and what it means for reducing the opportunity or the potential to relapse, it's pretty clear stuff. So for those two callers yesterday, really glad you made time for the program, and we're happy to take those types of calls, of course, here on the program. They also made specific reference, one of the callers, to having spent time at the Comfort Inn. I've never been in the doors, so I really can't speak with any authority about what goes on in there. But he talks about the contrast between the Comfort Inn and the sober living home where he's living now. Look, I understand the concept of the transition home, and we haven't had an update in a little while about just how successful we are at the Comfort Inn, but he talks about just endless drug use, endless overdoses, day after day after day inside the Comfort Inn. You know, he talks about spending all that time just in his room by himself to try to stay away from what would obviously be a trigger to use drugs yourself. If you're trying to kick the habit, but you're surrounded by people using, becomes virtually impossible. So for folks who are working in and operating the Comfort Inn, and he also talked about the prevalence of violence, that's not what it was for. I mean, there's got to be some stricter controls regarding drug use and violence. And I know they're not a rehab facility. I know they're not a detox facility. But for people who are living those particular life circumstances, that is not good. That is not helpful. It certainly reduces the possibility to transition from homelessness and addictions into a much better life circumstance, but that's not what's going on. So says this person who actually lived at the Comfort Inn. So let's talk about it. All right, maybe it's time to get Karen Gray, the Child and Youth Advocate, back on the program. We had her on not that long ago, I think just prior to Christmas. But there's some big questions being asked about something called the North Star Child and Youth Advocacy Centre. Opened in 2022, and there was a bunch of backers, including the provincial government. And then, just a year later, it shut down. And no real clear reason was given as to why. So it was a place for youth, who are victims of crimes to get whatever service they need. So all under one roof, medical, social workers, police, counsellors, but it went by the wayside. If children have or youth have a one-stop shop, it's probably pretty important. I mean, we talk about the Tony Humby case, the Bruce Escott case, many of their victims, alleged victims, well, in Escott's case, victims, were living in very vulnerable situations under provincial government care. So if something like the North Star Child and Youth Advocacy Centre was a good thing, and there's some 50 plus operating around the country, but the one that we had apparently is under review at this moment of time, so says the minister responsible, that's Social Supports Minister Jody Wall. Let's see whether or not we can actually have that facility brought back to bear. It sort of makes sense when you think about it out loud, that a one-stop shop for children who are very vulnerable, have been victims of crime, to be able to get all the suite of services they need in just one place. So it's interesting. And Karen, if you're listening this morning, please do come on and help us talk through it a little clearer. All right, on that front, when this story broke, I admitted to Dale Lamb, the president of the NLTA, I wasn't really sure what to make of it. So talk about the number of retired teachers who are now operating as substitute teachers. 10 years ago, the number was around 60. Last year, 600. So that's a huge difference. Since the story has been told, and since our conversation with Mr. Lamb, I've had a bunch of emails from substitute teachers who are younger, newer to the system, and they think this story speaks to a huge problem, not just for the big envelope of recruitment and retention, but their assertion is that the schools that they may indeed get some substitute opportunities at, they're bringing in the retirees. Why? Because they may be more familiar with them. Maybe they even worked at that school. So that's a real problem if I'm a young substitute teacher trying to get my foot in the door, do a year or two or more as a sub to hopefully get a full-time permanent job. But if schools are moving towards and offering priority, and I don't even know how the subsystem works in full, but that's the assertion by several young substitute teachers who say that's what's keeping them out of getting enough days to keep the roof over their head and the possibility to operate as a sub and then get a permanent full-time job. So that's the position put forward by many. That makes sense to me. Stick with education, this time post-secondary. I think there's many people applauding the fact that there's been an organizational restructure at the executive level at Memorial, down from 7 VPs to 3 VPs with a savings of $1 million, but only one person lost her job. Others have been brought down to different levels of pay and I guess given different titles. Okay, so even student unions are asking questions even about things like the tuition freeze. I get where they're coming from. They're talking about how it's going to be implemented. It's an important question. Tuition, of course, is a pretty important stream of revenue for Memorial University. So what's going to happen here? Even if tuition freezes, what happens, the same thing over the course of 2 decades plus, where the tuition was frozen, but other fees went up. So if MUN has to recoup some of this revenue shortfall and a tuition freeze is in place, are we simply going to see increases in other student fees? It's a really seriously good question, on-point question being asked by student unions, because at the end of the day, it's exactly how much you have to pay to be at Memorial University. Yes, we could break it down to tuition and campus renewal fees and other fees, but it's the end number is the concern. So if they try to recover some of this shortfall of revenue just by jacking up fees, then what has been accomplished? Good question being asked by the unions, the student unions on that front, and we're happy to take their call if they're so inclined here this morning. All right, I had a caller yesterday also talk about their experience at the new urgent care facility on Stavanger. So it's been pretty busy apparently, and they do offer walk-in services. So if you've had an experience there, good or bad, let's bring it forward here on the program this morning. So coming next week, there's going to be the opportunity to call and make an appointment. And they're also suggesting that you should call prior to going just to see what the status is at the facility at that moment in time. So you can jot this one down if you want to call ahead, and next week you'll be able to make an appointment. So it's local number 709-777-9111. So 777-9111. So I would be curious to hear about the experiences because I've heard a mixed bag. Someone tells me, fantastic. It's bright and airy and there's plenty of services offered therein and it looks to be well staffed. But then the caller yesterday said pretty much the exact opposite of that, which is not ideal. Last one. Or not last one. So in the world of transparency and accountability and public disclosure, it'd be nice to get an update. For starters, it'd be nice if the House of Assembly was open for a variety of reasons. But where is the current government now on the Auditor General's report regarding long-term care and personal care homes? I mean, when we had Denise Hanrahan in the program to talk about that particular report, it was unbelievable what they discovered. So whether it be the feces on the wall, some residents gone missing, a bunch of different errors, improperly administered medicine, which resulted in at least one death, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, the compliance reports which are not publicly disclosed. We need to get this done. I mean, even the association that operates personal care homes, of which there are many good ones and many good personal care home staff, but let's get the compliance issues publicly disclosed. Something's identified after an inspection, however severe, you put it out there. There's a timeline associated with bringing it back into compliance so that people know, whether it be the loved ones of those who are the residents currently, and or the next step in their life may indeed be moving into a care home and being able to pick and choose the ones that they think might be best suited to them based on the public disclosure of compliance-related issues. I think it'd be nice to hear from the Gov on that. All right. So, listening to the VOCM Morning Show this morning with Russell and Jerry Lynn, they had put out some form of question about the Upper Churchill MOU and the fact that Francois Legault, the Premier of Quebec, has now resigned. One respondent said something like, can you just all give it a rest? Let the process unfold. Well, I don't know. I don't think we can. I think there's just too much to this. So I'm told in one corner that nothing changes with Legault's resignation. But when people change, potentially circumstances do change. And it's the politics of it all that makes it frustrating but quasi-interesting. And what do I mean by that? Like, this is a commercial transaction, right? But it has very quickly become a political hot potato. So in this province, the Liberals told us it was a great deal, an excellent deal. And the Tories question as to whether or not that was true. In the province of Quebec, Legault and his coalition to Avenir Quebec said it was a great deal. The Parti Québécois, who's going to be the next government, says it's humiliating. So we've really got a commercial arrangement that has been dragged in full into the world of politics. So what does change here? I think it's a legitimate question that people are going to be asking out loud. And the timeline associated with this, whether or not you think it's a good deal or a bad deal, and I'll leave that entirely up to you, is it really feels like as the days go by, the likelihood of this becoming definitive agreements erodes. It really does feel like that. And for some people, you might be applauding, saying, good, I don't want to deal with Quebec. I don't want this particular deal to go through with the Upper Churchill or Gull or the associated transmission construction. But it feels like time's going to get away from us. And you can think that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it really feels more and more like that as the days go by. All right, a couple more. So today, the Supreme Court of Canada hearing final arguments regarding the Ethics Commissioner of the day, Mario Dion, when reviewing the ethical concerns regarding the We charity. And some people refer to it as the We charity scandal. And we know what happened. The Liberal government of the day decided to give We $43 million contract to run what was almost $1 billion student grant program. There was a familial connection between Justin Trudeau and the members at We, and of course Bill Morneau, who was the finance minister at the time. So the Ethics Commissioner at that point said that he found Morneau breached the Conflict of Interest Act, but he deemed that Trudeau did not. So what's being argued in front of the Supreme Court now as to whether or not they should be able to see the Ethics Commission function better by court challenges being allowed. I mean, governments can absolutely appoint a friendly as an ethics commissioner and may be able to tiptoe or tap dance around ethics breaches of the Conflict of Interest Code, but I think this argument makes sense. You know, we do indeed need to have a very keen, sharp focus on living up to the ethical standards we demand from our members of Parliament. So I've got no problem with this, because governments will change over time. The Tories will be in, the Liberals will be in, and back and forth they go. So I don't think this is a bad idea for the court challenge to be allowed when looking at decisions made by ethics commissioners, regardless of what party is in power at the time. So those final arguments today in front of the Supreme Court, this is pretty important to get right. I mean, we see a certain level of corruption at all levels of government. I mean, look no further south of the border, but hopefully there will indeed be the opportunity for a careful look in the courts at the ethics commissioner's rulings. Why not? I don't have a problem with that, do you? All right. So, and again, I'm told, why do we focus on these things? We do because they're right there in front of us. And this is what's going on in Greenland. All right, so don't take it from me, but take it from the American president himself. They're going to have Greenland come hell or high water through purchase or force. As a result now, more military presence in Greenland. German forces, Norwegian forces, Swedish forces, and Danish forces are going to amp up their presence in Denmark. It's a frustrating story for a variety of reasons. You know, the president says it's psychologically important to him. They talk about Russia circling and China circling. That may very well be, but are we going to be honest with ourselves knowing that Russia or China are not going to attack a NATO member? which would be Denmark in this case. So that's not going to happen. And they talk about, security, national security, Arctic security. Just open more bases. At one point, there was 30 bases in Denmark. And now they boiled it back down to 1. So I think we're all in favor of security in the Arctic, given the fact we're Canadian. So I don't know why this is going on the way it is. I suppose it's just the possibility to destabilize NATO even further than it already has been. But things like, do you want Russia or China your neighbor? Russia is 55 miles from Alaska. They're already the Americans' neighbor. I mean, remember when Sarah Palin said she'd get out on her front porch and see Russia? It sounded stupid, but it's not that far from the truth, though, either. So that's going to have implications for this country if when there's ever some sort of military action, which we can only hope is not the outcome here. But the president has said, come hell or high water, Greenland will be an American vassal state or whatever they think it's going to be. All right, we're on Twitter or VOCM Open Line. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we go back, I can feel it in my water. We're going to have a great show. And that's going to kick it off talking about access to addiction services. Don't go away. Welcome back. Let's begin this morning on the top of the board, line number 1. Good morning, Annette. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty Daly. Thank you so much for taking my call.
Happy to do it.
First of all, I just want to send you a bouquet because you have given us a platform to voice our concerns, and you're just so gracious. I think I was talking to you maybe last year. I have a daughter, 32, who is in full addiction. Downtown, homeless. And I just want to let everybody know that without these beds at Vita Nova, recovery for her and so many others are going to be near impossible. I'm not sure why the government is not funding those beds for Vita Nova. Everything that they need is in that facility, from the detox to the meetings to doctors, and I don't understand. I don't know what we're missing. I listened to Garrett yesterday, and I was just overwhelmed. I was just so proud. He did an amazing job yesterday, and I just want to, put that out there.
I think he did too. I really enjoyed the conversation, even though it was about some very dark times in his life, but now brighter days ahead. And it's because of access to services.
Absolutely. And he got through those services, and he stuck with it. And that's amazing. And he's doing so well, and I'm just so proud. And I would really like to see more people in recovery speak up and tell us how they did it, what they did, what worked, what didn't work. Because we know what's not working. We know that the shelters, low-barrier shelters, are not working. Someone who is in recovery, they're not going to recover in one of those shelters. He said it himself. They're using drugs openly. They're in addiction. There's mental health. You cannot recover in a place where it's just there in front of you. It's just too, it's too hard. So without these recovery homes, and I'm hoping now that we'll soon have one for females. Well, if we have one for males, and that's awesome. That's working out great. It was so good, to hear that he's doing so well, and I hope we hear from some other people because, that gives me hope for my daughter. Because right now she's stuck. She's really stuck. And when she reaches that clarity, that moment in time that she wants to get help, I'm not going to be able to afford to put her in the Vita Nova Treatment Center. And that's the place that she needs to go. I mean, I know the Grace Center is there, but from what I've heard from other people, they don't seem to stay there very long. They kind of, they last a day or so, and then they just walk out of there. But I think the location of the Vita Nova, it's up away from downtown, away from everybody. You're out in the fresh air, and you have access to everything that's there in that facility. I don't understand what's going on at Eastern Health. Why are they not covering this? I mean, I watched Minister Hogan up there, and they were cutting the ribbon, and it was all good things, and they were going to help people get, a place to go sober. They were going to cover these beds. Mm-hmm. And now, and here, like Dr. Parfrey, CEO of Eastern Health, what are we missing? Why did they change their minds and not fund a facility that we desperately need?
Well, in fairness, this is not even an NL Health Services conversation at this point. This is a political decision that needs to be made. Premier Wakeham pledged to fund the beds at Vita Nova via MCP. There's no good reason why there should be an empty bed there if there's someone who's living with an addiction who wants that help, can be in that bed and getting that help.
Absolutely.
So they've got to follow through to sweet. And I think we've got to change our tune. Vita Nova might not be perfect. And I've heard some people say, boy, we're sure shining the glossy knob of Vita Nova. Look, I don't know. I haven't been there. But certainly sounds like it's a better strategic approach or conceptual approach to treating people with addictions. So let's just make sure the funding is there. Let's go.
Yes, like why? I don't understand what's going on with MCP. Like if it needed to be funded, like what are we missing? Why did they change their mind? Why do they not have the money? They have money for the low barrier shelters. They give them grants. They're supplying all these needles and crack pipes and everything else. So if there's money for that, there's money to fund these beds. At least give it a chance. But it's just not. I don't know what's going on at Eastern Health or with the politicians, and I really don't understand. Like Premier Wakeham, he was at the rally with us at Confederation Building. He stood right behind me and my granddaughter, and he heard us, and he understood the pain that we're going through as parents with loved ones in addiction. So Minister Hogan, he was also there, and I spoke with him, and he spoke with my granddaughter. And I don't understand why they're not giving this a chance. Why is MCP not stepping up when they know this is life or death for our family members, for our children?
It's going to be a decision made in the Premier's office. That's where it's going to happen. And when and if that's done, then everything else follows suit at NL Health Services and at MCP. So we need the politics to make the very clear, politicians, to make the decision. Yes. Then we can let the rest unfold. And I'm going to be hopefully optimistic that happens in very short order.
I hope so too, and I hope that more people call, and the people, whoever is running MCP, take a hard look at this, and make the right decision. And in full capacity, that facility can 52 to 54 beds, 16 inpatient beds, 2 detox beds, and they have the transitional housing cabins. Like, that is just, it's what we need, and it's better than nothing. It's better than just watching our kids fall through the cracks, and we have to do. I think we should do whatever we can to help them, and I don't understand. I really hope that MCP comes through, and the government comes through. And Premier Wakeham, I hope you're listening, and I know you remember me because you stood right behind me. And we voted you in. We're hoping you guys are going to do the right thing I'm thankful for Guardians of Recovery and Tina, who's helped so many of us. And I really hope that something comes of this and someone else speaks up. And I really hope to hear from some more people like Garrett and see how he went through the system and what was working for him and what wasn't. And I have so much going on, and I'm so worried about my own daughter who's downtown right now. And she did have the opportunity to go to treatment. The day that we went to take her, she was in a drug psychosis and had a meltdown and missed her opportunity. So now she's at the bottom of the list. She's back downtown. She has to be the one to make a call to get herself put back on that list. But if she is not in her right mind, like, she's not capable, of making that adult decision.
It's a terrible circumstance you and your daughter find yourself in. And,
it is.
If Garrett's call or the other caller yesterday, if that gives someone any sort of hope when they currently have now, they're hopeless, then maybe that changes just one person's path as they try to get some support. And if they want it, we have to be able to provide it. Annette, I wish you and your family the best. I appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you so much, Patty Daly, and we appreciate you giving us this platform to help everybody.
Thank you very much. Stay in touch, Annette. Good luck.
Thanks so much, Patty.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. No good reason why we can't do better on that front. And, of course, sometimes the show takes on a certain theme and it just happens organically. But just that gentle and friendly reminder is we can talk about whatever you like. There was one email that came in and said, how come you're not talking about the second ICE-related shooting in Minneapolis in about a week? I think a week to the day. Well, we can talk about it. I'm happy to do it. And it's a different set of circumstances than the killing of Renee Good. But yes, there was another ICE-related shooting, this time a Venezuelan man shot in the leg. I saw the story. The ICE officer in this case was indeed attacked with shovels and a broom handle. But yeah, that's on the radar. If you want to talk about that or anything else under the sun, you can do it right after this. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. As per an email request from a resident of Springdale, talk about the case regarding the ferry captain Earl W. Windsor. So you've all seen the pictures. It's a pretty dilapidated looking, I guess maybe some people might call it a rust bucket. It's been bobbing there in the Springdale for quite a long time at this moment in time. So the Coast Guard has already issued an order to have it cut up for scrap. So they talk about it being it's contravention of one particular piece of legislation. Let's see if I can find it so I get it right. So the owner, Mr. Yates, George Yates, who's a businessman out in Springdale, the assertion is he's failed to comply with directions to address potential hazards and the risks of pollution from the Earl Windsor. There's already been a spill where he was fined $75,000 by the Coast Guard for failing to comply with directives following an incident in late 2024. Water leaked into the ship after a heavily corroded valve failed. So, mid-November, the Coast Guard called for proposals from companies who can cut up and dispose of the 16,000 gross ton ship in some sort of environmentally responsible manner. Now, Mr. Yates bought this particular vessel for some $20,000. Initially, he had listed it for resale at $2.5 million. Then he lowered to $1 million based on what he called negative publicity by the Coast Guard. But it has been there for quite a long time, and so I don't know if he has the opportunity to sell it, but there's an order to see this, and they've gone to tender to see which companies can come in and take care of the Captain Earl W. Windsor as it sits out there in Springdale. So there you go, resident of Springdale, your request satisfied. And on that front, we know that Marine Atlantic has secured another vessel. It's a 5-year lease. It won't be ready for this particular peak season. But the question being asked is whether or not we're actually adding much more in the way of capacity. It does offer approximately 20% more capacity than the Leif Erikson, but the Leif Erikson might be going away in full. So that would be a very modest increase in capacity for the operations at Marine Atlantic, when many people were hoping the other side of the coin would be bring in this new, yet to be renamed and repainted vessel in addition to the current existing fleet, because we see the backlog stories all the time. And come peak tourism season, you know the stories as well as I do. So yes, it's one thing for the passenger traffic to have a 50% reduction in fares and fees. That's a very good thing. But when you hear people say, I need it to be in pick the town, Halifax, for whatever, and I have to be there on the 22nd of July, but I need to come back in a few days after that, but I can't get passage for another 2 weeks on return, that's a problem. So capacity is still certainly a problem, commercial land passenger traffic for Marine Atlantic users. Also, when the province is looking to bring another ferry into the fleet, and remember, during the campaign, the pledge was to build 4 additional ferries and to build them here in this province. We'll see now whether or not some of these campaign pledges or promises are followed through on, but there were a bunch of them. And back to our first caller regarding Vita Nova, there's a penned letter from Premier Wakeham about doing exactly that, providing the financial support through billing MCP to be in one of those beds at Vita Nova. And then you talk about the low barrier shelters. You know, it's remarkable to me that we are one of the outliers here in the country with how we operate emergency shelters. As opposed to the province actually operating themselves with updated operational standards and oversight and monitoring and inspection, we leave it to the private landlord. And look, many of these private landlords are doing pretty well financially to take on operations that probably should be handled by the government itself. Has there ever been a real careful exercise done as to how much it costs to operate the shelters, what manifests itself in terms of profit for the landlord, versus what we think it would cost if the province took care of the shelter business themselves? I think we'd probably be up money. I think the shelters would likely be safer, and there's just doesn't make any sense to me how we operate the emergency shelters as a private sector offering. And you know, the immediate pushback will be, hey, why are you talking about the government taking on more bills? That's not what I said. What I said is we should understand the cost currently for emergency shelters versus if it was in full control of the provincial government. I can't imagine it would cost more. You see the numbers as much as I do. The amount of money that goes out the door for those operations, extraordinary. Millions and millions and millions of dollars every single year. Dave tells me that we're expecting the FFAW on the program this morning. And I suppose that's to talk about the crab rebate, which came in at 28 cents, which constitutes $5.25 a pound, versus what the FFAW and other harvesters who have called the show were anticipating $1 in the rebate. So Dwan Street, I'm not going to put any words in her mouth, but she pretty much said, unless there's a correction offered here, there won't be a crab season this year. And we know that that is the most lucrative of all species that the harvesters go at year over year. So we're anticipating that. And also, I think the deadline is quickly approaching for the DFO-led consultation regarding next year's recreational food fishery, this year's recreational food fishery. In the past, even though they wait until the 11th hour to give us the announcement, it's been the same thing, right? 39 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 5 per person, 15 per boat, even though that's simply a recommendation, not an actual law. So the consultation process, which is all online, it is unfortunate that there wasn't a roaming crew from DFO holding in-person consultations in different pockets of the province. But if you want to bring forward your perspective on that particular issue, we can do that as well. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're speaking with you. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Linda Swain just passed me this, a traffic advisory for those traveling on the highway in Central. The Trans-Canada is currently closed in both directions just west of the weigh scales near Grand Falls, Windsor, due to a 2-vehicle collision involving a tractor-trailer. Drivers can expect delays in the area. Updates will be provided as soon as they become available. So if you're on the Trans-Canada heading in either direction in Central, just west of the weigh scales, Grand Falls, Windsor, the highway is closed in both directions. Hopefully the issue is not too serious, but it also involves a tractor-trailer. So, yeah. Response to comments I made about the RNC record high number of calls in 2025, over 90,000. You can decipher that however you see fit. It did not include a breakdown for the types of calls and the percentage of calls associated with property crimes all the way up. But then it's the thought, and I think it was a question of the day earlier this week about, do you feel more or less safe in your community? You know, they went on to talk about feeling safe to walk at night and things like that. The numbers, we've seen an uptick in this province, no doubt about it. The numbers from Stats Canada are pretty clear, but it's across the country. The crime and the safety conversation is a big part of day-to-day discourse. People want to feel safe where they live, and then they talk about big city crime. And we can worry about our own backyard, of course we can. But people point to just how dangerous places like Toronto are. Last year, Toronto hit a 50-year low in homicides. A 50-year low. People go on and say, well, people aren't reporting crime, so we don't have accurate crime numbers. Murder does not go unreported. So when we're talking about the most violent crime, 50-year low in homicides in Toronto in 2025, which I think is a pretty interesting story and an interesting stat. And on that front, some people really quite cross with the fact that I've been talking about the gun buyback program and thinking that the way it's currently structured is probably not going to do much to enhance public safety, and it probably isn't going to work the way people hope it does. Now, for starters, the list that the federal government has put forward about what types of firearms have been banned or prohibited, some of the ones that aren't have the exact same capacity of some that are. So it's a lot of justified confusion, or people are justifiably confused with that reality. And the gun buyback, I mean, let's just think about it out loud. Number one, we have no earthly idea how much it's going to cost. And we absolutely have zero idea of how good it's going to work. In Cape Breton, where they kicked it off in the form of a pilot program, they anticipated some 200 firearms would be turned over. The end result, 25. Why I don't think it's going to do much to enhance public safety is those who have firearms, handguns in particular, who are wanting and willing to commit a gun-related crime, they're not going to walk up to the RCMP with their firearm and turn it in to get paid whatever amount of money. So that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I'm all about trying to enhance public safety. I certainly think pragmatic conversations regarding gun control are required in this country, but that approach, I just don't think, and people can disagree with me, and we can have that conversation, I think we should, but I don't see gangsters with their handguns walking up to the RCMP and just willfully turning them over and to get some sort of financial compensation for it. So, I don't know if that's the proper conversation, the proper approach to public safety regarding gun-related crime. If you listen to the Association of Police Chiefs as it pertains to guns, specifically handguns, and there has been some positive change made by the federal government about transport and own and reselling of handguns in particular, but we have seen exercises where they have followed specific guns or collections of guns, handguns, from the United States that ends up in the hands of gangsters in big city Canada. So, again, I know we can't inspect every single container as thoroughly as required and every single square inch of any vehicle or any mode of transportation coming from the States to Canada, but we can and should do better. No doubt about it. Especially if we're talking about keeping more and more guns out of more and more criminals' hands. If the police chiefs, I think they know more about it than me, and they say our handgun problem really has a root in the United States of America. And so, when you use that logic, which I think it is very logical, is when we're told that we're a national security threat to the United States because of the flow of fentanyl, and any bit of fentanyl is extremely dangerous, of course, but the percentage of fentanyl coming from this country in the United States, if I use their logic, it should be their responsibility to keep the fentanyl out. And if that's not the case, then it should be their responsibility to keep the guns out of Canada. So it's remarkable that we find ourselves in this particular conversation regarding national security and our relationship with the Americans. And every time I bring it up, people get really upset if you're not just giving glowing reviews to the current president, who I think is clearly unwell and not fit for office. It's the issue regarding trade. It's not my words, it's the president's words. He said that it's completely irrelevant in reference to CUSMA, the Canada-United States-Mexico Free Trade Agreement. It's hard to really square some of these massive circles. When this was renewed, what NAFTA became CUSMA, we were told after very difficult negotiations that it was a great deal for the Americans, and it was signed on by the president. And now all of a sudden, with all of these tariff-related decisions, petulant as they may be, now all of a sudden we're a national security risk. And we're irrelevant. Canada wants a deal, but the Americans apparently don't need anything from Canada. When in fact we know that's not true. Let's just take the auto sector. The auto industry executives in the United States are quite clear on this. facts. The integrated supply chain between all three countries is the reason why the auto industry works the way it does, and the reason they're able to keep the expenses down. There is no such thing as a vehicle that's manufactured from top to bottom with every different part in either Mexico, the United States, or Canada. It's not true, and so the auto pact that has been in place since the mid-60s is working the way the industry wants it to work. So they do need Canada's cooperation in the auto industry. And then it's hydropower. Of course they need the hydropower that's provided by Canadian provinces to the American consumer. Oil. Of course they need the 4 million barrels a day that flow from this country into the United States of America. Potash. Of course they need the potash that comes from Saskatchewan, the number one exporter of potash in the world. And the number one consumer of Saskatchewan's potash are American farmers. So there's lots of stuff that we have that they want and they need. You know, we can get into the optics of American booze being taken off the shelves in certain provinces and the plans into the future, but the reliability of our trading partner, specifically the States, is not what it once was and not what it should be, which is why I'm also a little bit confused when people are really not approving of the Prime Minister's trip to China. Look, Chinese interference in this country is very real. There's no doubt about it. And the relationship between this country and China has tattered somewhat over the last decade. It's the first time in almost a decade since a Canadian Prime Minister has been in China. And this was an invitation from President Xi, and so the Prime Minister is there. There's plenty of opportunity for Canadian product to make its way in greater volume to China, whether it be oil or otherwise. And canola. We are the number one exporter of canola in the world. China is the number one importer of canola. And so all these talks about 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles, the BYD, that's going to be part of the conversation, I would assume. Trying to get more of our oil into China is going to be part of the conversation. China has last year reported a trade surplus of $1.2 trillion. There's business there to be had. So attention to human rights, of course, should be obviously important to many Canadians. And then the whole implication of our relationship with China. I'll put it back out there, even though some people are going to send me harshly worded emails. The biggest complicating factor with doing business with China is not Carney's visit, it's not Trudeau's attitude, it's that FIPA arrangement. It's a 31 deal we're locked into. No matter what we think, no matter what we say, no matter whether we think we've been hard done by any trade relationship or any presence of Chinese companies in this country, we're locked in. There's only one exemption. There's an Investment Act, a piece of federal legislation, where when we're talking about critical minerals or rare earth minerals, China's actually been forced to divest in a couple of those companies in this country. I was going to say maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So I don't know why we can't hope that there's a further deal to be struck with China, because we also know that after the budget is passed in the country of India and their billion plus people, then there's going to be a visit from the Prime Minister to India to see what can be done on that front. And yes, after it is off to Qatar, and then for many people's favorite is then to Davos in Switzerland to speak at the World Economic Forum. And we're happy to take that on if you're so inclined. And remember, the keynote address coming this year at WEF is from DJT, the President of the United States. Let's check in on Twitter. We're VOCM Open Line, you know what to do. Open Line at VOCM.com is our email address. Our favorites when you join us live on the air, so do exactly that during this news break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. So if you've been calling and having a hard time getting through, we're all settled here now, so the phone lines are open for your call here at this moment. All right, very quickly, in reference I made to the Prime Minister in China and then going on to India to try to diversify markets, as people call it. It's probably extremely important to attempt to do it, and that's not to say that we don't turn our back on the United States, because that would be, of course, completely foolish. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 2/3 of Canada's GDP is related to trade with the United States. So getting some sort of deal done there is obviously critically important, as pointed out by an email during the news break. But on that front, there's only one thing we can control regarding trade negotiations, is our position. We have very little influence on trying to coordinate the Americans' position on trade, even though some of the exaggerations they make about they don't need Canada for anything, because of course they do. The trade policy has worked very well for decades between the two countries. I should add Mexico into that as well. So yes, no one's suggesting that we can all of a sudden flip a switch and there's no reliance required on the American market, because there is, and there will be into the future. So there's that. And then there's the reference to China and interference in this country. We had a full judicial inquiry about foreign interference into elections, and the results were pretty clear. There are bad actors out there who are meddling in our politics and meddling in influencing people's attitudes and opinions during election campaigns. Then we've heard from the business community in the country, and they talk about foreign interference into the economy of the country, foreign interference into businesses in this country. So it's real. I'll add to it the issue regarding media influence and what it means in things like, which are extremely important, are things like the Alberta separatist movement. I have no earthly idea if it's ever going to be successful for the separatists themselves, but I think there's huge questions to be asked about foreign interference into that process. I mean, one of their lead voices, this guy named Jeffrey Rath, he's been in the United States many, many times looking for a conversation and looking for funding and getting it. So there's no reason to believe that if there is the opportunity for Alberta to separate, whether that be as a standalone sovereign nation or to become the so-called 51st state, of course, with the wealth of resources in Alberta, primarily oil, that would be a very appealing opportunity for the Americans. So you know full well that they are meddling actively in that particular conversation in the province of Alberta. And then people say, well, you get your hate on for Alberta, furthest thing from the truth. I had a great life in Alberta. I enjoyed my time in Alberta. I met my wife in Alberta. My children were born in Alberta. So we were there for about a decade, the entirety of the 90s. So that's not about it at all. It's about Confederation, how it stands, how it looks. And yes, Alberta belongs in this country. My personal opinion. Then I do hear from Albertans saying, look, they're carrying the country and the contribution to the East and whatnot. They're the biggest industry, the biggest province in the country insofar as economic activity. But that's not true. They're number 4 behind Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia. But obviously still an economic powerhouse and a key part of the country. But some of the conversations manipulated with some pretty exaggerated misinformation. Let's go to line number 1. Say good morning to the Liberal member for Conception Bay East, Bell Island, Shadow Minister for Energy and Mines. That's Fred Hutton. Good morning, Fred. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. Happy New Year to you and your listeners.
The same to you. Thank you.
I wanted to call in this morning. I happened to hear a portion of your preamble this morning, and you kind of expressed similar thoughts that I was having in terms of more and more the timelines here with the Churchill Falls Memorandum of Understanding are concerning, and if this window is closing, what that could mean for the possibility of us getting a deal. And I just wanted to express a couple of thoughts, first of all, on, the fact that Premier Legault announced yesterday that he is stepping down. And I don't think there's any big shock there. It had been widely speculated among the political pundits, in Quebec and other areas that he was probably going to go, given what's going on with the polls and everything else. And what that means now for this deal, which was signed back in, or the MOU, which was signed back in December of 2024. I think we need to remind folks that signing the MOU was not anything that locked us in. It was non-binding. It was just to continue to look at whether or not this was a possibility to continue on to what we call the definitive agreements, which would be the final purchase and sale or whatever of the hydroelectricity, from Quebec, from Newfoundland and Labrador Hydro, rather, to Quebec Hydro. And, we're still very far away from that. And the timelines on this concern me as well, given the fact that we're doing another independent review. And by the time that's done at the end of April, early May, we still have to work towards those definitive agreements because, as everybody knows, those talks have stalled now, and they haven't been going on since just prior to the writ being dropped here in Newfoundland and Labrador. And my fear is that we'll never even get to a point where we'll know if there's a possibility of a final agreement, a definitive agreement. And yesterday is proof again that, things can change quickly in political life. Legault is leaving. Premier Fury has left. There's been a change of government here in Newfoundland and Labrador. The head of Quebec Hydro has changed since this MOU was signed. All these factors are concerning that the window of possibility here for a definitive agreement, is closing. And I will say again that as somebody who followed this very closely for 30-odd years in media, I was shocked that we even got an opportunity opportunity to do this, and would never want to be part of any government or any House of Assembly, either opposition or in government, that would sign off on something that would give us the same kind of deal that the 1969 Churchill Falls deal gave us. That we'd be talking about it, and your kids and my kids 50 years from now, that, how terrible it is. But we're not even, it's fair that we're not even going to get a chance to get to that point to see if there is a possibility of a deal. And with the continuing passage of time, and, the fact that Premier Legault, even in his resignation speech yesterday, mentioned at great length, really, the Churchill Falls Memorandum of Understanding with Newfoundland and Labrador, and hoping that, it can be, a resolution can be found here, a deal can be found here, and, a little bit, puzzled, I guess might be the word, by Premier Wakeham's response to say it doesn't matter who's sitting across the table from him when he's negotiating this. I hope they get a deal, by the way. I hope the Conservative government can get a deal. If it's changed from what was the original deal and it can be even better, well, perfect. But I think the province needs it, and I think that if we miss this opportunity, it's going to be at the detriment of all Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, and at least even the possibility to see if that definitive agreement is worth signing and worth proceeding with. But it will matter who's across the table, because the Parti Québécois leader has said it's a humiliating deal, and the likelihood of having the political will at that point in time, seems less likely to me. We've had the Supreme Court of Canada challenges. We've had the Superior Court challenges. We've had other court challenges. We've tried this for 55 years to change this deal. It took political will to get it to this point, and my fear is that political will, the light is dimming on that.
When Premier Wakeham says it doesn't matter who's sitting across the table, well, in actual fact, if it's Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon, it does matter, because the Parti Québécois have said clearly that there will be no deal.
Right.
Certainly not in its current structure. And look, regardless of who I'm speaking with at this moment in time, regardless of the listener and your position on the MOU, just to break down the bare facts of timing is just a legitimate part of the conversation, whether you're for or against this particular deal. So some people might applaud that the clock is going to run out, but some people will be worried that the clock will be the thing that crushes this deal, no matter how we slice it. If the report has to come back by the end of April, then it has to be understood and debated in the House of Assembly. Then it's got to restart negotiations and come up with definitive agreements. Then it's got to come back to the general public. Then we're going to have a referendum, because I don't even understand that one. If the Independent Review Committee says, yeah, this is a good deal, then why would we have a referendum in the first place? But all the while those days are ticking by, the October election in Quebec is going to be something we all have to be mindful of. And again, it doesn't matter whether or not you think this is a good deal. That's the facts on the ground. Time is a concern here.
I agree with you 100%. And your timing on this, I think the Quebec election is in early October, so there'll be nothing done in September. So basically, this has to be done by the end of August. If they've got to go through a leadership now with Legault's party. As you say, this is not coming back till the end of April, early May. Any government, had it been a Liberal or a PC government, will want to take 8 or 10 days to look it over, to make a decision on this. Their cabinet has to meet to decide on how they're going to proceed. If the independent panel calls it, yes, let's do it, it's a good deal. Although, again, even that aspect of it, one of the members of the panel has already said that this is not a good deal. He had already spent, months with with the independent panel that was originally struck. Now he's back on it. So I don't know how, and nothing has changed with the MOU. It's still the same MOU that was there when Mr. Wilson was an original member of the independent panel, and the second person, Mr. Holborn, is still part of that. He had made no comments really publicly about it, because it was the lead on the panel, Dennis Brown, who was doing that. But we're into that. All these other aspects, as you say, a review of it. It's going to have to go to the House of Assembly. Then it's going to have to, people are going to have to be educated about what this very intricate deal is. I mean, within the MOU, there's another dozen or more definitive agreements. Very complicated. The MOU is only 37 pages long, so it's really troubling that this window of opportunity is going to close, and as a result, we're going to lose out on this. And I mean, I heard independent members in the House last January when we were discussing this at our special debate talk about, how we had gotten close on goal before, and, only what if back in 2002 or 2003, how would things be different here in this province, if we had signed some kind of an agreement back then? Wouldn't have changed the 69 agreement, but there was all sorts of different aspects to that, and it's really, if we had 2 hours, we could talk about it, but it just concerns me that this opportunity in a year from now, you and I will be having a conversation about, how difficult financially this province, the difficult financial aspects of the province here, and, only what if we had that money? And I'm sure Craig Party is up there now wishing, I wonder if we had that $1 billion a year, for the next 17 years, how I could forecast out quite differently than without it.
Yeah. Just a couple of things, and I do have to get going. The inclusion of Michael Wilson, again, I think is a similar conversation when your government appointed Dennis Brown to be the chair of that 3-person independent review panel, because he had publicly stated his support for the MOU before that committee was struck. So both governments have made some very interesting choices as to who's going to be members of the panel. I think things have changed, though, for Michael Wilson, in fairness. He was talking about the interference by the government. He also talked about the very narrow scope in their mandate or terms of reference to examine the MOU, as opposed to be able to include all of the different associated risks that might not be included, and all the different changing the water on the beans into the future. So I think there's a different scope that maybe allowed Mr. Wilson to think, okay, I'll have another look at it based on this new set of circumstances from this current PC government. But again, whether people like it or not, time will either run out with a deal or time will run out with no deal. That's as fundamental as that. And it's very much a political exercise when in fact what we're talking about is a commercial arrangement, which is unfortunate, but it's unavoidable. Very last thoughts before I have to go, Fred.
It is. People have to remember, JP Morgan Chase were hired to review this and give an independent analysis of it. They have trillions of dollars in their book of business. This is what they do. Power advisory. That's all they've done for the last 3 decades. They were hired by the provincial government, by Hydro, to look at this deal, and they said it was a good deal, as did J.P. Morgan Chase. And Stikeman Elliott was a law firm outside of the province that was hired to review the homework of the 2 other law firms that were looking at this, the legalities of it. They agreed. So, there were independent reviews done, in addition to the review that was being done by the panel here appointed by the Liberal government. The big concern today, again, is the clock is ticking, and to Mr. Wakeham, Mr. Premier Wakeham, it will matter who is sitting across the table from you in a year from now, or in 7 months or 8 months from now, or whenever the election is. Because it could be called earlier, but they have to have it by October. So I believe it will matter. And it will. If we miss this opportunity, it's to the detriment of Newfoundland and Labrador.
Appreciate the time.
All its residents.
Thank you, Fred.
Okay, Patty, take care. Bye-bye. All the best. Thanks.
Bye-bye. Fred Hutton is the Shadow Minister for Energy and Mines, the Liberal member for Conception Bay East Bell Island. All right, we do have to get to the break, but the reference to an email say, why am I afraid to talk about extra? Why? I'm not, for starters. I don't know what I have to be fearful of. But it's about the Bill C9 regarding religious freedoms and what have you. See lots of stuff put out there about what the bill says, and I'm not so sure much of it is accurate, but we can talk about that. I'll break it down a little further after the break. Don't go away. Welcome back. Let's go to line number 2. Dave, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Morning.
I'm hearing some MOU banter there. Not long ago, I listened to Fred Hutton, and I gotta say that it's kind of difficult to listen to without saying anything, because we're discussing a deal, an MOU with Quebec, and it's being promoted as the best deal. We gotta sign it. Which should send up a bunch of red flags. We're now down to, once again, negotiating. If we sign the MOU, we'll be down to negotiating a deal with Quebec until they walk away from the MOU process, or should we? But I don't think it's as easy for us to walk away from this after it's signed. So, in light of the fact that how could this be the best deal? It's the only deal that's been looked at. It's the only deal on the table to be considered. And one of the largest arguments for signing it is that if by the time the next government comes in place, should that be the change of government hands and whatever, if the bloc gets in and they actually have up front, we know that they don't like this MOU or they wouldn't sign it or whatever, where would that place us in the negotiative process? Because we're kind of stuck in limbo because we felt we had to deal with Quebec. We know that the world appetite for power now, and in particular hydroelectric power, is only going to get bigger. Trump has come out and said no windmills and all this type of thing down there. Okay, fine. And basically, the world is looking for places to have power. It's my opinion and the opinion of the group that I've been involved with, and we actually met with the Premier not long after Christmas. We're sitting on 12,000 megawatts of potential power in the Lower Churchill Basin.
Yeah, but it doesn't really matter what the world wants. It matters what our close markets want. Because we're not going to transport hydroelectricity to Europe, for instance, or nor are we going to send it to Mexico. So it really does matter about this country and the United States of America. That's the market for hydro. Because, I mean, we just think about it. I mean, the power loss from Muskrat to Soldiers Pond is real. Just imagine trying to wheel hydropower to, I don't know, Cabo San Lucas or something. So it's really Canada and it's really the United States, and more specifically the northeastern United States, which is the market for our hydro, right?
Yep, agreed. But in addition to that, are you aware of even one negotiation that has taken place with the U.S. for this power? Like, they're right next door. There's no trouble. I mean, Mr. Risley just put in a proposal along with Pattern Energy that they would go sub-sea to New Brunswick, blah, blah, blah. Why can't we do that? The money that they're looking at for this project, Quebec has got a huge portion of it coming to them from the federal government in the terms of this will be a nation-building project. Well, why can't that nation also include Newfoundland? And it's our resources, it's on our land. Why can't we be put forward for a nation-building project with the same, I guess, abilities and privileges, whatever you want to call it, that have been afforded to Quebec? Why in the name of God could that not be Newfoundland? We're doing a project on our soil.
Yeah, no one says it can't. I mean, if things change, like if this landed on the Major Projects Office, that might change things. If the federal government funds transmission for Hydro-Quebec, that changes things. If there's all of a sudden an east-west energy corridor into the future, even though we've been kicking that around since Diefenbaker, that changes things. But if I guess if we're talking about, you know, can we do it? Short answer is, of course we can. Is it wise to do it on a go-alone basis? Unless there's power purchase agreements for 25, 30, 40 years in place to justify the associated costs, boy, oh boy. I mean, Muskrat Falls is as much a transmission project as it is a hydroelectric dam. You know, inside that $13.5 billion price tag, which hasn't been updated in quite a while, I'm going to opine that it's like $8 billion worth of transmission. Just picture trying to replicate that for 2,225 megawatts at Gulf, for instance, to bring it down from Labrador across to the island, down the Long Range Mountains, another subsea cable to land in Nova Scotia. That cable cost $1.5 billion in 10 years ago monies. So, I mean, maybe there's a way to justify it as a go alone, but the infrastructure that we don't have, that we would have to build to get to any market, whether it be in Upper Canada or the northeastern United States, I haven't seen anyone to do the math, but I bet that number's pretty big.
Yep, I have no doubt in my mind. And it's just as big for Quebec as it would be for us.
Except they have a bunch of existing transmission, though, right? That's the one differentiation there is. They really do have some transmission in Quebec and into the northeastern United States where they already have secured some markets.
Yep, and you would think that, you know, if they weren't looking for the entire pie, they would be somewhat negotiative in the process, where Newfoundland would be probably very well served by having been given a transmission corridor. They've denied us. Not only have they denied us a transmission corridor, they've done it in a process of duress to try and force this deal down our necks. When the Liberals were in, they wanted this deal to be signed by April. Why in the name of God is there such a short time frame being placed on the approval of a project, which realistically is a legacy project for Newfoundland, could be something that will give us a lot better ability to handle our bills and probably even prosper a little bit. But we were denied the right by the same group that came with a document written under the laws of Quebec with plenty of stop mechanisms in there to stop us even from, after the deal is signed, if we decided we wanted to go, according to the MOU, if we decided that we wanted to go, say, to develop Gull Island ourselves, we can, without Quebec's approval. Well,
in this current structure, yeah.
What's that?
In this current operations of this existing MOU. Just because of the time on the clock, Dave, I'll give you the floor for the last little bit here before I have to go.
Well, basically, what I would like people in Newfoundland to realize, and probably, I'm sure most will agree, that it is time that we did a deal that thought of Newfoundland first and seen Newfoundland's assets being used for Newfoundlanders. That's not what this MOU is about. It's about a very, very fixed rate of. I've heard actual comparisons to the 1969 deal. It's no better. We tried to fight that one 7 times in court. We got nowhere. Even when it was proven that it was an unfair deal, they all knew it was an unfair deal, but no, we'll live with that. We're going to go on with that. You guys can figure things out for yourself. Well, I can tell you right now, there are some very powerful minds that are of the opinion that we could certainly not only do this ourselves, but I don't even know, like with the way things are going now with the AI centers and all this type of thing, we might not have to look at exporting or sending off one bit of our power. The demand for these things is absolutely phenomenal. You tag that to a hydroelectric source of power, it's the greenest AI that you're ever going to see. And we know the world demand is huge for this right now. So why can't it be us? I'm afraid that I haven't just tossed away our ability not only to do a mega project that's going to benefit us, but we've done them in the past, and we can do this one again. Most of the players involved are very used to this. And like for me, I just say it's the only deal, the only one that's been discussed. How could it be the best deal? We haven't even tried.
Appreciate the time, Dave. Thanks for doing it.
Thanks, Betty.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, let's get a break. And when we come back, as advertised, the president of the FFAW, Dwan Street, joins us next. Then you, don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 8. Say good morning to the president at the FFAW. That's Dwan Street. Good morning, Dwan. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Good morning to you. So, any sort of status update on the crab rebate story? We all know and heard the outrage at 28 cents when people thought it should be $1. Where are we?
Yeah, so it's sad that we're starting to feel a little bit like Bill Murray and Groundhog Day, right? It's unfortunate I can't be calling you with any positive and good news in the fishing industry ever, and it seems like it's always pushing back against the crookery of the members of the ASP. And this one, I think, is the final straw. Obviously, I'm sure all your listeners have seen the news, have seen social media, what's going on. And we spoke over the summer, obviously, of a couple of things that were going on that really concerned us and led us to believe that this was exactly the result we were going to get. So last week, obviously, we met with Ministers O'Driscoll and Guzman. I will say, obviously both ministers very understanding, very accessible, and they get it. And the Premier was able to meet with us as well, and we had a really good discussion. So we had brought to the ministers obviously 4 things that I won't even say suggestions to help fix this long term, but 4 demands and things that we had brought to the Liberal government and that fell on deaf ears. So number 1, again, we spoke about this over the summer. If a processing company in this province has a processing license, why do they need a buyer's license to ship out unfinished product? They don't. So we asked the government to quash that. We also asked for severe fines if there's evidence of collusion, and we brought a number of scenarios to them that we were able to discover and pretty solid evidence, and the Premier did commit that he will be looking into upping those fines for anybody who goes against the Act. The other one, we said, open it up. If you want to build a fish plant in this province, you want to make the investment right now, you can't go to a bank and get money to build a fish plant and assume that you're going to get a license, because there is a process where that has to be approved. But the Premier agrees with us. If you want to make that investment and you want to build a plant, you need that license. You need that conditional license to go to the bank. So he has committed to doing that as well. And our fourth demand is that the province figure out some other way of price setting, because, as I said to the Premier, there's an old saying, right? You can't negotiate with terrorists. And we can't go to that table in good faith and trying to negotiate with the ASP when they're going back and colluding amongst themselves to try to find ways to screw the process and the outcome. So what we got from the Premier was commitment on all of it. We were very, very happy with Premier Wakeham. And, he asked the right questions. He had a lot of the same concerns and said that he was going to look into especially some discrepancies with some numbers they had brought to the table that they'd gotten from the previous government that didn't match up with some of the things that we had. So it's exactly what we were looking for. Now, are we cautiously optimistic? Yes, because yesterday Premier Wakeham met with the ASB, and I'm sure that was a great meeting, when they show up to the table with their poor mouth as to why none of this should happen and why they should continue to consolidate the industry like they have. But Premier Wakeham did tell the ASB he'd like to get both parties back to the table, and he will facilitate the meeting, and let's figure out what's going on here. And, of course, they wouldn't commit to that, and they've gone back to all their parties to see what they're going to do there and come back to the Premier ASAP with an answer.
Yeah, so I've been asked this a couple of times, and it's a good question. Probably the first one I should have asked you this morning is, what is a crab rebate in the first place, and why is it required? As opposed to simply a price was set, the harvesters get paid what the agreed, or pardon me, the dictated price from the price setting panel. So what is a rebate, and how does the process work?
So what we tried to do, Paddy, in previous years, we always kind of, you're trying to predict where the market is going to go. And some years it holds steady. Some years we've seen it crashes. Some years it surges. There was a year that, we were getting $7.60 a pound and the market went up, and we had already gone for a reconsideration, and there was no way to capture that value. So what we tried to do with this rebate is set a flat price to begin the season. And at the end of the year, receipts would be provided to a third-party auditor, and an adjustment would be provided to everybody. And everybody would get it no matter when you landed your crab, excuse me, and everybody would receive a fair price. Because under the old system, once a price was determined, you had one opportunity to go back to the panel for what they call a reconsideration. And there was no way to capture that retro. So let's just say the price was $5 a pound at the beginning of the season, and that market went through the roof. Then you go and you get the reconsideration, and the ones that get that extra money are the ones from that day onward. So we tried to even it out over the season because, of course, Newfoundland and Labrador, we are the largest suppliers of snow crab to the international market. And when you're dealing with international markets over a large time frame, there's going to be fluctuations, but we wanted to make sure that everybody, regardless of how much crab you had to catch, when you catch it, received a fair price.
Fair enough. And then the next comments made after the 28 cents was announced was, you said, unless there's a correction offered here, there will be no spring crab fishery. Much like a few years ago where the boats were tied up, the ASP said that constitutes a strike as ordered by the union, which is not allowed by law. So what do you mean by there will be no crab fishery?
Until the system is fixed, Paddy, nobody is going out and providing their product to market for it to be undersold. And that's what we've seen has gone on here. The province has committed to going back to John Sackton. Of course, he's a market analyst. He always provides market reports to the province, usually at the beginning of the season, prediction of what's going to happen. And last year we had him do an update a few weeks in, because what happened was, for the first time in history, there's always a gap between Gulf crab and Newfoundland and Labrador crab when it starts reporting on the Urner Barry Index. Generally, it's a few cents. Sometimes it's as high as 20 cents. Last year was $1.06 US, and nobody could explain it. And even John Sackton, a few weeks in, said, okay, hang on, give it a couple of weeks. That's going to even out, but it didn't. So the Premier's going to go back to John Sackton now and ask him to provide an analysis as to why this happened. And I suggested as well that he go to Les Hodge, who is the only other analyst who does that type of work, to see if he can explain what happened. And if nobody can explain it, and that's one of the questions that the Premier wants answered by the ASP in front of us in that meeting, is explain what happened here. And if they can't explain it, it's clear that the system is broken. So why is anybody going to untie their boat, go out and land a product knowing that the ASP is, I'll give you a couple of examples of what happened this year. Dumping it into the market as an inferior product for a cheaper price. We were in Boston hearing rumors of what some of the big buyers were signing contracts for. And our colleagues in the Maritimes were saying, that doesn't make any sense. Why would they do that? Why would they undersell a product? Secondly, taking it off this island unprocessed, buying it here for $4.97, shipping it up in the Maritimes, getting it processed up there, and getting that value at the end. And the harvester had no way to capture it. Thirdly, I mean, we had Quinlan's here purchase crab from Rough Water Traps, who purchased it for a little over $6 from the harvester, processed it, and then sold it. And there's no way to capture that value. And clearly they still made money on it. So this whole concept of the ASP right now with the poor mouth of, the market just wasn't there, our product is an inferior product, and they've been preaching that for years. I don't know why they say that things, what they call our rhetoric, is bad for the market when they're literally out there saying our product is inferior to the Gulf. It makes no sense. So Premier Wakeham, Minister O'Driscoll, and Minister Gouzni have a lot of work to do. But I think from what we heard from them, they understand this and they're willing to take that on. So we're confident that this is obviously not going to be fixed in a day. This is going to be a long term. It's a marathon, not a sprint, as they say, right? But there's a lot that has to go on here, and I think we are going to be on the right path. It's just going to take a lot of guts from this government.
So, insofar as a tie-up again, so is there any union liability or risk with, I guess, ordering this or giving this type of direction to the harvester? If an individual harvester says, I'm not going out under this current structure, that's one thing. But for your comments to possibly lead to a mass tie-up, is there any risk associated with that for your organisation?
I'm not telling everybody to tie up. I'm just relaying what I'm hearing from our members. And our members are saying, I'm not standing for this. I've also told Minister Gouzni that we need to sit down and we need to rip open FICPA. And we really need to look at what it allows our folks to do, the power it gives the ASP, and the power it takes away from our members. Because that legislation hasn't been ripped open in decades. So what we're looking at here is a complete overhaul of this industry. I think we're on the right path. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. And our members are not standing for it anymore. So this is not me saying, the FFAW is saying that there's not going to be a crab fishery. What I'm saying is our members are saying, I'm not landing my product and not getting my fair share because it's time. I mean, if you look at the prices that were in the Maritimes, and I know not everybody in the Maritimes got $7-8, but the ones that did, it was areas that had competition. We have no competition here. We have a cartel. We saw what happened last year. Not this past season, the season before. It was the first season we tried to bring in a formula. The price was set at $3. One small company, took some boats from Quinlan Brothers. Quinlan started calling around offering $4 to $4.50 to harvesters for crab. That's what happens with competition. Unfortunately, Jeff Loader, hauled everybody on a conference call at that point, and all of a sudden everybody's paying $3.45 across the board. So they completely stifled that competition. But that's what the system is supposed to be built on. And that's what you have in the Maritimes. So when Premier Wakeham says, if you want to open a fish plant, let's do it, that's what we need, because we need those buyers coming in, driving that price, and it's going to drive wages for plant workers too, because, hey, if there's two plants in your community, and one is paying you, $17, and another one's going to open up and needs workers, he's probably going to pay you 18 or 19, right? So this whole industry needs an overhaul, and that's what we're aiming for here.
Appreciate the time this morning, Dwan. Thanks for doing it.
Thanks, Daddy.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Dwan Street, the president at the FFAW. Your thoughts on that or anything else, you can do it right after this. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Say good morning to Sarah Worthman, an NL Queer Research Initiative co-chair external. Joins us on line 3. Hi, Sarah. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you today?
Doing okay, thanks. How about you?
Good.
Excellent. Tell us about the fundraiser you got upcoming.
Yeah, so we have a fundraiser for our organization, and we're partnering with about a dozen different businesses in the kind of St. John's metropolitan area. It's essentially called the St. John's Hot Chocolate Festival. So all of these different businesses, kind of like the Burger Battle, will have their own unique hot chocolate entry. They're starting to come in. We're going to release them soon. They all sound really delicious. I'm excited about them. And then you can actually go and vote online for your favorite hot chocolate and for the most creative hot chocolate. And then $1 from every hot chocolate sold goes back to our organization.
I may be a little bit thick in the head on this one, but other than putting little mini marshmallows on, what are we talking about for specialty hot chocolates?
Oh, there's lots of different kinds. This is inspired by Vancouver has had one for about 10 years, this festival. So we're kind of inspired a little bit by the one in Vancouver, and there's a lot on the West Coast, actually. Calgary as well has quite a similar one. So there's all different kinds of hot chocolates. I'm looking through, there's some that are going to be Lucky Charms cereal milk based. Nice. There's another one that's going to be, I don't want to give too much away, Patty. Okay. But there's one that's going to be like Earl Grey, to kind of allude to, with local organic honey. So there's all different kinds, and it's really impressive, honestly, seeing these like entries roll in. The way people are getting so creative with the different ways to have hot chocolate. And at the end of the day, in my opinion, you can't really have a bad hot chocolate. So even if you try one and you're like, okay, maybe this one isn't the winner, you still get to try a delicious hot chocolate.
All sounds good to me, and people are much more creative than I am. So how will the money be used at your organization, whatever is raised? What kind of initiatives are you undertaking?
Yeah, so we do lots of different types of community events. We run 2S LGBTQ plus library in partnership with Quadrangle. So we've got about almost 400 books in there specifically for the community. That's free for anyone, not just members, but allies, to come and check them out. We also run a digital archive, which has over 200 materials related to 2S LGBTQ history in Newfoundland and Labrador. So that's at the nlqueerarchive.com. We do all kinds of community events. So we've got like different outreach events that we do. Back in October, we did a queer history walk through downtown St. John's. So we do lots of different things in the community, and this will help us directly in doing that.
Sounds good to me. Give the folks the details one more time so they can participate if they're so inclined.
Absolutely. So we have a website. It's hotchocolate.yyt.ca. And so you'll be able to see all of the vendors that are up there now. And you'll also be able to vote once we open up voting through that website. We also have social media. So we have an Instagram, which is the St. John's Hot Chocolate Festival on Instagram and Facebook. And the @ for Instagram is Hot Chocolate Fest YYT.
Appreciate your time. Good luck with this, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Bye-bye. Here goes Sarah Worthman with the NL Queer Research Initiative, co-chair external. I don't want to put someone on the show here now, nudge them up against the 11 o'clock news, which is coming up here in 90 seconds. But Holly's there to talk about a CUPE post on public services. I think I'm familiar with the one that she's referring to. Then there's a couple of callers there to want to pick up on the MOU conversation. Some of the suggestions I hear, and a fairly frequently repeated concern that many have, is not only, say, for instance, Quebec's authority for decision-making at Gull Island, and we could talk about risk associated with that or what have you, but people also point to the length of the term here, 50 years. I get where that's coming from, but let's just spitball a little bit. Like one emailer said, it should be no more than 10. I mean, realistically speaking, what type of utility or province is going to enter into an agreement the length of 10 years, considering that Gull, there's been plenty of work on it, probably more work done at Gull Island, the Gull Island site, than people realise. But when you start to get into building it out and developing it in full, it might take almost a decade to do that. So I'm not so sure we're going to be able to find any interest in 10-year deals to develop something as massive as Gull Island itself. Even just the expansion at the Upper Churchill is going to take quite a long time by the time that gets fully satisfied. And then, of course, you add in the 2 transmission projects, the associated transmission. So let's get Gord back. Hopefully he was one of the callers that did want to discuss the MOU. And I did, I said off the top of the show, there was a caller into the VOCM morning show this morning with Russell Bowers and Jerry Lynn Mackey saying, let's just stop talking about it, let the process unfold. Part of the problem here is the actual process itself, isn't it? So those callers and then you, right after the news. Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Say good morning to the province's consumer advocate. That's Dennis Brown. Good morning, Dennis. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How are you?
Very well, thank you. How about yourself?
Good, and Happy New Year belatedly.
The same to you and your
you
family.
and all your listeners.
Appreciate that, Dennis. Same to you and yours.
And the issue that is emerging, and I'm constantly barraged with it right now, are calls from ratepayers complaining about their electricity bills. Many people are stating, like one person stated today, in December 11th, his bill was $93, and January 14th, it was $296. And some people are being pretty descriptive, too, about the way they're describing it. And I'm talking about, we've gotten hundreds of, between emails and phone calls, they are in the hundreds. I've never experienced anything like this. And the common perception that people have is that there's something wrong with the metering system. Now, one fellow was pretty descriptive in what he said, and I'll just read it out to you. He contacted Newfoundland Power, and he said his bill had gone from $584 to $880. And he said, when I called to ask what the hell is going on, Newfoundland Power said, yeah, well, it's been colder out. I said, yeah, but I'm on oil heat. Newfoundland Power said, oh, well, maybe your oil tank is leaking. And the person wrote, he said, honestly, you can't make this up. So Newfoundland Power's reaction, or how they're handling a lot of this, leaves much to be desired. If people perceive a problem with their meter, the meter has to be checked. And they should have a helpline on for all of these people who are getting these extraordinary bills. That's not much to ask. Newfoundland Power is making $50 million. I'm sorry, they're making $1 million. I can put it this way. They're making close in profit $1 million a week from Newfoundland Power's 270,000 customers. So $52 million a year in profit. And we pay for everything at Newfoundland Power, from their doorknobs to their personnel to everyone who's working there. So they can put someone on and people on to deal with these situations. And Paddy, I can tell you, this has to change. The only way to change it is to do what other provinces have done. And we're way behind. Other provinces have opted into smart meters. Smart meters will enable you to monitor your electricity hourly, daily, so you can adjust accordingly yourself. Now, Newfoundland Power is favorable towards smart meters, but they say we're not ready for them here. We'll be ready in, 5 or 10 years or something. Last time I looked, I thought they said 2034, and we'd be ready for them. Why is that? Why are we not ready? And because the meters they're using are not used in other jurisdictions. The meters they're using, and they're still purchasing these meters and installing them in people's homes, are viewed as obsolete in other jurisdictions. Why can't we have the advantages other jurisdictions have? What is wrong here? And the board is partially responsible for this as well. I mean, the members of the board, the chair and the vice chair, they have annual meetings with chairs and vice chairs and personnel from all over Canada. They had to know the trends going on in other jurisdictions, smart meters. Why didn't they take action sooner than this? Why are we doing it now at the last minute? Because our own experts have testified before Newfoundland Power, and we've told them 10 years ago, smart meters is where this has to go. But it's like the board is sleepy, that they're not alert to what's going on elsewhere, and we're disadvantaged.
A couple of quick questions. So, insofar as smart meters go, what would the process look like? Would it be just piecemeal replacing a meter when it deems to be need replaced, or would there have to be a very tight timeline for everyone to get a smart meter? How would that have to work for it to work properly for the utility and for the customer?
Well, you could do it gradually. Right now, we're paying for these outdated meters, and they're putting these outdated meters out there still, even though they know truly that smart meters will be a better thing to have. We're paying for that already. We give Newfoundland Power, the customers give them. This year they're giving Newfoundland Power. You, the ratepayers, we're giving them $130 million for capital expenditures. Now, part of that capital expenditures are for the old meters that they're buying. So they will do a switch here. So you wouldn't see a large increase in your bill because they already have a lot of that money allotted to the outdated meters that they're putting in people's homes now, a couple of $1 million a year there. So you would do it over a 3-year period, and it would cost ratepayers in capital expenditures. That's where it has to go. And $130 million is a lot to give to that utility in any 1 year. So they could take a portion of that each year now and put into the purchase of smart meters and do the right thing for consumers.
I want to go back to the current state of affairs. You're talking about establishing a helpline at Newfoundland Power for people with questions or concerns about their bills. If the messaging from the utility has been what you've already described this morning, what would change if there was a dedicated helpline, even though you can still call a customer agent at Newfoundland Power? So what meaningful change comes to pass with the new dedicated line that you're describing?
The new dedicated line is for the problems at hand right now, but that's just going to continue. They will only stop when they put in smart meters so people can monitor their own usage and deal with it accordingly. And now Newfoundland Power doesn't really want you to have that ability. They'd sooner have business as usual, because business as usual for Newfoundland Power ensures them that they're getting nearly $1 million a week in profit from her ratepayers. Why would they want to interfere or interrupt that? They're in business.
Fair enough. And this question, not sure how to ask it, I'll do my best. So I see a lot of things floating around about the rate of pay afforded to executives at Newfoundland Power. We know that we have plenty of control at Newfoundland Labrador Hydro because they're a Crown corporation, and they've done away with certain things like some of the big lofty bonuses and what have you. Pay has been reined in. But is there any conversation to be had or any actual authority that we have about salaries at Fortis or Newfoundland Power? Because I get asked that question all the time.
Well, the salaries are, some of them are into rates, some of them are given by way of bonuses and additional compensation by Fortis, so we're not paying for that. But that's all dealt with at the board, and the board looks at other jurisdictions and sees what comparable personnel are paid in other places, and Newfoundland Power always says if we don't get what they're getting in other places, our executives will all leave. Well, I've never seen anyone leave Newfoundland who is getting paid, a couple $100,000 to go somewhere else. They have extraordinary salaries for this small jurisdiction. I should also mention right now, too, Patty, that this is only going to get more and more complicated. Right now, we're paying 15.2 cents a kilowatt. So in 2026, that will rise by 2.25% to help pay for Muskrat Falls. And Muskrat Falls will be paid for in that fashion, but right now and until 2030, the rates are subsidized. Our rates are being subsidized right now to the tune of $500 million annually.
Yep.
Due to Muskrat Falls. So that will end in about 36, 38 months. That's gone. And once that is gone, your bill will go up to about 23 cents, 24, 25 cents a kilowatt. That's thanks to Muskrat Falls, the project which should never have seen the light of day. And that will continue. So we are in a very difficult spot, and we don't have much time. So that's why one thing that we can assist ratepayers with is the smart meters. That's one thing we have to do. But the government is going to need other sources of revenue. And when you think about it too, Paddy, all the money that's been put into Muskrat Falls and all the time spent by governments looking to find money to keep rates affordable, there's been no stop to it. Once Muskrat Falls got on the go and we had an inquiry and the commissioner made his conclusions, we all know who's responsible. They're all out there. They are the responsible people for giving it to us. But they gave it to us to get financing, through financing from the banks. And the bank said, where are your customers? You don't have any external customers. And they said, well, we do. Our customer will be our ratepayers. So we were hung out to dry to pay for it. And that's why our rates are what they are, because without Muskrat Falls, we'd be paying about 12 cents a kilowatt right now.
Dennis, before I get going, this is a question from a listener. He wants me to ask you about the weather normalization reserve Newfoundland Power has. How much money is there? You know, he says a bunch of cash in and won't get paid to the debt for over a year or something. Can you help us understand that weather normalization reserve?
No, there is a weather normalization factor that is built into the system, and I can't even begin to explain that. I need one of my experts there to take that on the way it works. There is a weather factor in all of this, of course, and Newfoundland Power is not incorrect in saying in December and into January the winds were extraordinary and it was difficult to keep your house heated. But when we're getting such examples from ratepayers of the rates going up by $200 and $300, is extraordinary. It's more than the weather. And maybe the problem is with their meters. That's not inconceivable. These meters are not used anywhere else anymore. I think might be one exception, might be one province, might be Manitoba, where they have a different system. They might still be using it, but generally they're smart meters are where jurisdictions have gone, because that gives people control of their bill to a certain degree. So we have to deal with this now. We can't just let everything go. We can't just ignore what's happening, and the plan has to be put in place now. We got 36 months of $500 subsidies, $500 million subsidies. When you think, where could have all that money been used if they weren't subsidizing that? We'd have a prison, we'd have hospitals, we have everything that we need. We threw it all away due to Muskrat Falls, and that hasn't gotten any better. It's only going to get worse.
I appreciate the time, Dennis. Thanks for doing it.
Listen, all the best to you and all the best to your listeners. We're getting hundreds of emails and calls. I can't possibly answer them all, so we are trying to deal with it as best we can. But in the end, it's Newfoundland Power that has to take some action and inform ratepayers and advertise and say, this is a number you're to call if you're having trouble with your meter right now. And they should not just let this go away and tell people or try to explain it the way they did that man. There was a letter I read, and he was in fact on oil heat. He couldn't understand it at all. So they have to do something, and it's on them. It's their meters. If their meters are faulty, we need to know it, and maybe there needs to be an investigation, independent, on these meters that they're using, which are out of date and viewed as out of date elsewhere.
Appreciate your time, Dennis. Thank you.
All the best.
You
Take
too.
care.
Bye-bye. Dennis Brown, the province's consumer advocate. Let's get a break in. Phil, you stay there. Talk about the MOU. Holly wants to talk about CUPE. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 5. Phil, you're on the air.
Paddy, I got to pay you a compliment. You got me flabbergasted on this show this morning, the past hour. And what you're providing for Newfoundland, a voice to hear all the things that's happened to us in the government and our people, there's nothing can replace you. Now, first of all, about an hour ago in the car, I was coming home and I heard, I think it was Fred Hutton, talking about this MOU Muskrat Falls. And he made a couple of comments that just I was sick over. Well, the clock is running, and the politics in a year, there's going to be a new election, and the ball is in our court. We better do something about it. Well, this kind of attitude and this kind of approach is what we've been doing for 50, 60 years. It's not because of those things. It's not because of time and who's what politician. You got to do the right thing. You got to have the right people who are knowledgeable, brilliant on business, looking after the finances of the people of this province. And then after Fred Hutton was finished, there was a man, I think his name was Dave, I guess he's a businessman, and he spoke brilliantly, perfectly on what's happening with the MOU and what needs to be done. And we're talking about the Premier is trying to do what's right, people to criticize him, and the election in Quebec, they're going to make here or so. That's not important to us. Listen, we're sitting on something, a hydro project down there that could be in not the billions, but the hundreds of billions of dollars. When this artificial intelligence gets going, you know, the tremendous amount of electricity is needed for these computers, and in the next 15, 20 years, you're not going to see nothing like it. And this gold, it's a gold mine, is an electricity mine. I just use that down there on the Churchill River, Gold Island and Muskrat Park. This is going to be unbelievable in value. And we're wondering about what we should do today and make a deal on it so the present people can be heroes and put their name on down in the library somewhere. Now, and then on comes Dennis Brown. And there's a lady on there, I think, talking about the fishery, tremendous about the money that he's been taking, the dollar that we're losing to crab fishermen, which I can't get into. And then Dennis Brown comes on and explains it and talks about it. This is a tremendous show. Paddy, when are we going to do, when are the people in Newfoundland going to put their own businessmen? You mean to tell me there's no intelligent businessmen in Newfoundland and no investors that can't do this deal themselves instead of giving. Ever since Confederation, we've given away the fishery. That's what the foreigners did for us. They gave the fishery, the ground fishery away. The minerals were given away to the smelters in Ontario and gone to China. That's a nice deal. And offshore, the oil, all those values, that's been taken from us and gone elsewhere. We don't even have a proper an oil refinery here. And all this is the same picture. We got to get this MOU right for us. And it's too bad if Quebec don't like what happened. It's going to go by the way. Well, so it should go. We got another 12 or 14 years, and we'll get it right for us by the billions and billions of dollars. And you've exposed this, what you've done here on this program this morning, you've been doing it all along. You've exposed the cancer that's eaten Newfoundland alive ever since Confederation. They've taken all the resources from us, and now you've got people that can't pay their homes, can't pay their electricity. The insurance rates have gone up on my house and my cars, as it has for everybody. Seniors over in the mall trying to get heated, they can't afford everything. And I got a letter from the Premier, a beautiful letter, that they're going to try to do something about fixed income seniors. But the whole picture, I mean, it's become a nightmare to live in this province, and you've exposed it all. I just hope that it makes sense what I'm saying. I'm so I don't know how I am this morning. You got me every which way. But this is the most important thing to our future, what you're talking about here.
Yeah, and you know, insofar as good people doing the negotiations, I think if we're being honest, regardless if you support the Liberals or the Tories, there was a pretty solid group of people that were involved in the initial negotiations leading up to the MOU. Like, for instance, if we're talking about experience in big business and experience in the energy field, I mean, Carl Smith was the Chief Financial Officer of Fortis. I mean, that's some pretty good horsepower right there. Jennifer Williams, who seems to be pretty competent to me at the helm of Newfoundland Labrador Hydro. Dennis Mahoney, one of the sharpest labour attorneys in the country. So we had good people at it. The problem really very quickly, from my perspective, the problem very quickly went from the details of a commercial arrangement to the politics of it all. I mean, it was so hard in this province. It was so hard in the province of Quebec. Both opposition parties in both provinces took up political opposition to it. I think we've gotten away from the commercial arrangement, and we've really made it I'm not talking about you, Phil, or Philip, or we've got a lot of politics involved in what is a business deal.
Well, Patty, you know, if business people make this deal elsewhere, the experts, and, you know, J.P. Morgan Bank and all this, and the politics of Quebec and Canada and so on, that's involved, well, they're going to do what they can. It's going to be the benefit from them. As for an example, Premier Dunderdale went up to Mr. Harper back when they were trying to sign the Muskrat Falls deal, and they needed $5 billion from the federal government. And Mr. Harper said, well, look here, you won't get it unless you agree to what CETA, which is the European nations in this deal that we're making with the rest of Canada, you've got to do what CETA wants, which is give up the 10% minimum processing rights to what's cut off our shore that had to come ashore to be processed in our plants. Cathy Dunderdale gave that away, so none of them come ashore. All these foreign boats out there can process it out there and carry it across the ocean. I couldn't believe this kind of stuff. This is what you got going on. Sure, where's our people? Where's our problems? It's unbelievable. So they're not doing what's right for the people, but there has to be people in there who, in their heart, the first thing you've got to have your heart for Newfoundland. That's the first thing got to happen. If you don't have that, you shouldn't be involved in the process or banking or nothing. The rest of it comes from your heart is with the people of Newfoundland, like yours and mine.
I appreciate making time and your patience this morning, Phil. Thanks for doing it.
Okay, Patty.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. All right, let's get a break for the news. When we come back, Holly, you are next, talking Cupid and then whatever else you want to talk about. Listener, don't go away.
The Tim Powers Show. Join the conversation weekday afternoons at 4 p.m. on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 4. Good morning, Holly. You're on the air.
How's it going, Patty?
Not too bad today. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good. First off, I would like to extend my sympathies to every last caller that I've listened to so far, because I feel that it's absolutely sad what's happening in Newfoundland and Labrador, and I like to sympathize with everybody at the province at this point, because I cannot believe it myself what's going on. I'm going to tell you the truth, okay?
Like what? What are you referring to?
Well, first off, Dave Callahan has some decent ideas when it comes to the Muskrat Falls and Churchill MOU. I will never doubt that. Dave's a good man. Dwan Street, of course, great piece on the crab situation. In my opinion, the fishermen not going to do this is probably absolutely the correct thing to do. I would even take it further and say, my opinion, I think the entire province needs to undergo a general strike, and I will explain that, as well as the man who called in regards to the Newfoundland Power bill discrepancy, and your last caller who was quite frustrated but had many, many points. I would like to commend them all for very good calls. Patty, this morning, what caught my eye was a post from CUPE yesterday morning, and they're speaking to the fact that the upcoming year, 2026, will be a difficult year to defend public services in Newfoundland and Labrador. And they're concerned about attacks on their services, funding cuts, reduction of service, and public-private partnerships. And Patty, I don't want to be cruel here this morning. I'm trying to be very nice because I hope that I can actually get through to some people of the province what I have to say, okay? In February 2024, I called you, and I attempted to explain certain parts of the Paris Agreement, the Paris Accord. And one of the examples I gave was the P3s, okay? And at the time, you were struggling to connect the dots that I was attempting to connect, and I apologize for that because I'm beginning to realize that my brain connects patterns that most people struggle to see, okay? However, I feel it really important that we talk about this. In the call in 2024, I pointed out that the situation of Newfoundland and Labrador will eventually end in a new turn towards oil and gas, which we're now seeing with Tony Wakeham.
Sorry, say that part again about oil? Can you repeat that for me, please? Yeah, what about it, sorry?
Well, we went from green energy to green hydrogen saga, but I predict that basically once that would follow through, eventually they'll come to somewhat of their senses and there'll be like a pivot back towards oil and gas, which we're seeing today with the new government.
How so?
Well, they're planning to do new developments, I believe, Bay du Nord. There's also talks about carbon capture on the West Coast and I believe the Gendark Basin.
Well, no. So the Equinor-led project at Bay du Nord and exploration took place, when the Liberals were in power and then was greenlit by the federal Liberal government. I'm not so sure what exactly has changed in the oil and gas world for this current government. Of course, they're bullish on the industry, but I was wondering if you had any specifics.
And that's what I'm getting at. Mr. Wakeham is quite bullish in the industry. I also spoke to NATO. I mentioned that NATO was a P3, and I questioned the capability of NATO at the time. As I said, all of this goes back to the sustainable development agenda and so forth. And
in regards to a lot of the calls you had this morning, they are absolutely correct. It's simply they don't recognize the white elephant in the room that's making this all happen, is what I would say, okay? And I feel I'm correct when it comes to the P3s. You're seeing the outcome of what I said today. Like, there's a crunch where they're changing a public service into a public-private service. And I did say in my former call in 2024 that this would be extended right across Canada. And right now you are seeing parts of the healthcare system being somewhat privatized little by little. Okay.
So what does that have to do with Paris? I just want to see if I can't possibly connect the dots like you are. So what does that have to do with Paris?
Yeah. The Paris Agreement, sir. The net zero by 2030 and so forth. And these agendas apply a new governance, you can say, to the current systems we understand, or we feel we understand. So you're dealing with people who are entering a system that they're used to predicting how it works. Like, you form the committee, the NGOs need to be consulted. I mean, we're not unfamiliar with this stuff. However, as the last caller pointed out, they needed to follow the CETA, the Canadian-European Free Trade Agreement, in order to get a deal. And it's these globalist connections, I'm not going to say agendas, but it's these globalist ties right now through the Paris Accord governance as such, which is stakeholder capitalism, sustainable development. What the system is doing, it's giving power to people who do not live in Newfoundland and Labrador. It's giving them the ability to come in and scoop up all our resources while the common man, the taxpayer, is paying through the nose to make sure that all these, I'm going to say it, fly-by-night ideas.
So just basic question.
For the most part of them.
So expanding some opportunities for private offerings inside of healthcare, I am going to admit I'm struggling with the relation to the Paris Agreement when you talk about private healthcare.
Yes, because the Paris Agreement affects more than climate. And if you were paying attention in the past few months, Bill Gates released quite a long letter to his blog. And he was basically in the letter giving the justification for pivoting from the climate push over to more of a poverty and human effect. So basically they recognize that their goals are slowing down due to the current political climate. However, in smaller areas, such as Newfoundland and Labrador, these agendas are allowed to go forward behind closed doors without anybody noticing, because nobody's connecting these small areas to the larger global scene. And really, the only connection people in Newfoundland and Labrador seem to be able to make is when it comes to the Churchill Falls and the Lower Churchill. And I can understand that because it involves people outside the province. What they need to do, everybody in Newfoundland in every sector right now, which includes all public sectors, all private sectors, if you expect to get control of your system for Newfoundlanders, if you truly believe and love Newfoundlanders, you need to get a handle on what the governance of the Paris Agreement truly entails, okay?
But what does it have to do with health, though, with healthcare and privatization and, getting diagnostic services or hip or knee replacements? What does that have to do with Paris? I'm really not sure what that means.
Well, as Bill Gates pointed out in his letter, now they're going to pivot towards the human factor. So it's going to be poverty, it's food access, water access, and guess what? That also includes healthcare now, does it not? Yes. However, they want you, in my opinion, now this is just my opinion, and I've been right, as I said, about a few points I made back in 2024 when I last addressed this on the call. They want you to suffer so you will agree to what they have planned. And the man that called in suggesting the smart meters is probably the best example of that. And with that being said, Patty, I will admit there's a smart meter on my house down here in Florida. And it's very handy when power goes out. It almost lets you know exactly which power pole the problem is at. So there's benefits, okay? There has been a lot of pushback in the province, people having reservations in terms of the smart meter. I won't go into that. However, there is going to be, the saying is, it's called the Hegelian dialectic, which basically can be summarized with problem, reaction, solution. So they pushed the healthcare system, they pushed the price of food, they pushed the price of gas, they pushed the price of electricity to a point the public, the people of Newfoundland, or, well, at this point Canada, you can go right across the world with this, are into a position of austerity. And I'm sure you're familiar with the saying, what is it, poor, sick, and afraid? Well,
austerity?
Once you have the general population in a position of austerity, they're more likely to accept anything that may provide a relief. So you kind of see that, for example, with Muskrat Falls. I'll use Muskrat Falls as the example. They did the project. They made sure it went over budget. Now, you may argue with me that that is my opinion, okay? I feel that was intentional. So it left the province strapped with a situation that they could barely deal with, and we're seeing the outcome of that today, okay? So the solution presented by government and NGOs throughout the province, I will point out, a lot of Halapu groups have been given out free heat pumps, for example. The intention is to push them into an austerity point to make them think, for example, the heat pump is the solution to their high electrical bill. Now, that's just one example.
Okay.
You can repeat this. You can repeat this with the healthcare system. You can repeat it with the price of oil and gas. I'm just letting you know how it works.
Yeah,
sir.
but that's not how it works. I mean, anyway.
Oh, that is exact. Well, then explain to me why I predicted certain things that have all come to pass.
But I don't even know what you're talking about.
You never do, and that's the sad part.
Okay, Holly. Well, I'm happy enough to get outsmarted, but it kind of feels like you're talking in circles.
I don't need to be outsmarting you, Patty. I'm getting concerned for what's happening with the province here right now.
Okay.
And I highly suggest that people need to really inform themselves in terms of the Paris Agreement. The fact that it has been ratified in Canada, it's law, and the governance behind that treaty.
It's ratified by 195 countries and the European Union.
And that's fine. And you're wondering why there's so much chaos across the world right now, Patty.
Okay.
Exactly.
I appreciate the time, Holly. Thanks for calling.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. All right, final break of the morning. Gord, you're next. Talk MOU. Welcome back. Let's go to line number 6. Gord, you're on the air.
Hi, Patty. How are you today?
Doing okay. How about you?
Oh, just waiting. In any case, I just wanted to make a couple of comments on the Churchill MOU.
Sure.
And the main thing I'm concerned about right now is clarification. If I were to vote in a referendum now, I'd have to vote against it because I have no understanding of what's going on there or what's proposed. It's got to be boiled down to a simplified version so that the average person like myself can understand what we're actually getting out of it. How much, when I first heard it, that we were signing an MOU and we're going to get 30 times what we'd been getting for the power at Churchill Falls, I was very enthused. And as I learned more and more, I got less and less enthused and more confused. So I don't know if somebody can get on or the government can put out some information that will allow us to say, okay, we got so much for power from Quebec Hydro in 24. And once the MOU is sold, that's going to be increased to such and such an amount. That's sort of a thing the average person could understand.
Yeah.
I could go on, and I'll probably confuse myself, but hopefully you get the gist of what I'm saying.
I think I do. Your first point is a good one, is if you had to vote today, you'd probably vote against it because you don't have a full comprehensive understanding of it. I think that's probably a very common sentiment right across the province, I would suggest. Now, there is some breakdown inside the MOU and different schedules about the pathway to 5.9 cents per kilowatt hour away from 0.2 cents per kilowatt hour. So there is a bit of a predictable path, say, for instance, to 2041, and then into 51, and then into 61. So I think some of that information is indeed out there.
It's sort of there, Patty, and I'm fairly well educated. I've got a history in power generation, and I understand generally the production of power and the transmission, distribution, and the cost of power. But I've beaten my head off against the information that I've found, and I really have no clear picture of what it really represents down the road.
Fair enough, which is another reason, Gord, you have actual experience in this field, and that's why I think the referendum is, at this moment, with the understanding of the MOU, and then it gets even further complicated when we add all the nitty-gritty legal details and associated risk in what's going to be 37-page MOU versus maybe 10, 12, 15 definitive agreements with all the legalese attached to it, which is going to be thousands upon thousands of pages. I think we're going to get more information and consequently maybe get even more confused.
Yeah, this old king wanted to know everything one time, and eventually, before he died, he got the message: "You're born, you live, you die." That's the sort of the simplification I would need to say, "Yeah, I understand this," and not 40 pages, but one page would do it for me, and I can send somebody an email with the facts that I need, or you, or whatever, to make up my mind whether it's good or bad.
That's fair. Newfoundland Labrador Hydro did put out a frequently asked questions piece, and some people can give it the merit that it has, or that they think it deserves, or what have you. But your ultimate point of give me a bite-sized morsel breakdown for the lay person to understand exactly what we're getting ourselves into. In addition to that, and this work has already been done, but for some reason government has not released it, and maybe the PCs will. But even just the basic understanding of what the implications of 2041 are. If you could just give us that as a starting point, because without that, then how to understand the merits or the upside or the downside of the next 16 years is going to be pretty tricky. So they did that work. So let's just have that so that every person knows, okay, here's what 2041 means, and then compare or contrast it to the MOU and the schedule of events and payments.
That would certainly help, Patty, but why they haven't done this and educated people a little more, especially because, like I say, I'm in a cloud. I have no idea what it actually will boil down to us. Whether people will 10 years down the road be moaning the fact that we've been taken again, or what, Anyway, that's pretty much all I had to say, sir. Thank you for taking my call.
I appreciate you making time for the show, Gord. Thank you.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye-bye. All right, final word this morning goes to line number 1. Good morning, Heber. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. Heber Reeves, calling from St. Lawrence, sir.
Welcome to the show.
I'm calling about light and power, sir.
Yep.
I went yesterday. I live alone, and my son very seldom get home because he's away truck driving all the time. But saying that, I went and got my light bill yesterday. I could not believe my eyes, sir. I could not believe my eyes. My last light bill was usually around $4.50, $4.25. I went yesterday, got my light bill $1,249, sir. $1,249. How can you survive with a pension like I am? Go ahead.
So it went from $400 plus to $1,200 plus?
Yes, sir. $1,249.
Well, there's something patently wrong there. I mean, I understand.
Definitely wrong there. I called Light and Power, and they couldn't give me a good answer. Tell me what's going on. Can you? I'm living by myself, and my wife's gone 10 years, and my heaters are the lowest they can go. I have electric heat, I know, but I never did it before. I lived here the past 10 winters by myself.
Yeah, and of course, it's not only simply about the dollar amount, even though that's the most important one to the ratepayer. It's also about usage. So have you compared how many megawatts or how many kilowatts you used, say, month over month, and compare it on your bills?
No, not really. No. I couldn't not believe it for that bit that high. I wouldn't mind if it was $500 or $600, but go to $1,249.
That's madness.
That's crazy.
I agree. Sir,
you know where I'm coming from.
I do. I mean,
someone got to help me.
Boy, I wish I could do something to help on that particular front, because that is an absolutely unbelievable increase, and it's going to be almost impossible for that to be justified. I appreciate you doing this morning. Pardon?
I hope EOCM wax this right on the airwaves, sir.
You're right.
All right, thanks for your time, Patty.
Anytime. Stay in touch. All right.
Yeah, okay,
Bye-bye.
sir. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. What? 400 plus to 1,200 plus? All right, good show today. Big thanks to all hands. We will indeed pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning, right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.